Good afternoon and welcome to the latest in a series of GSA Snapshot webinars. Today we're joined by a stellar lineup of analysts from CCS Insight, GSA's new official research partner, who will provide their insight and analysis on the big themes coming out of this year's Mobile World Congress in Barcelona. Following the readout from each of the analysts covering operators, devices and networks, we'll have time for the team to take your questions. To do this, please just submit questions using the chat function on the sidebar, and we'll address them in turn as we get to the end of the event. The slides presented today, including a CCS Insight report on the major trends coming out of Mobile World Congress, will be shared with you immediately following this event. We've scheduled about 45 minutes to an hour for this event, obviously depending on the volume of questions that we get. But first, to get things started, I'd like to hand over to Joe Barrett, President of GSA, who will share a brief update on the GSA's activities.
Thank you, Richard, and welcome everybody to one of the first webinars of the season. For those who don't know GSA, I'm sure you all do, the Global Mobile Suppliers Association has been serving the industry since 1998, representing suppliers. And what we see here is just some of the statistics that we are providing into the industry. We're getting users getting access to our database from over 200 countries, producing up to 200 reports and papers and presentations every year about what's actually happening in the industry. So looking around 4G, number of devices, 5G devices, you can see close now to 1,300. And tracking all networks, spectrum, especially, we have probably the largest spectrum working group in the industry with over 175 participants from our members. And all of our data is kept in our GAMBoD databases, which are often referenced by companies around the world, and companies can get access to that core data from our reports and just have to contact us through the website. So lots of information today. We've got a bit of a fast pace, so I'm going to hand over now to Ben Wood, who will kick this off. Ben, please take it away.
Thank you very much indeed, Joe. Welcome from myself. I'm leading the team here at CCS Insight. We've got a great amount of data to share with you. We all attended the event, and in terms of the key themes, I'll start off with arguably the most important one, which was it was the return of a major in-person industry event. And personally, for me, who's been going to this event for a very long time, I was thrilled to get back. You can see in the picture on the bottom left-hand side, that was the Tuesday. There were a lot of people there, around 60,000 according to the organizers, about half of what this show was at its peak, but it really was fantastic. The show was held against the backdrop of a very obviously difficult situation with Ukraine, and that was reflected in the show, and it maybe dampened a little bit of the noise that came out of the show, but that was obviously totally understandable. 5G, which was the headline story in 2019 at the last major event, where there were lots of people, had actually transitioned. So this time it was more just a kind of given. And rather than being the headline story, it was omnipresent at the show, a real understanding that 5G is here. There's going to be 1 billion users on 5G this year. There's going to be 1 million base stations on China Mobile, for example. It's part of the fabric of comms now, and it's really understanding how that's going to drive the industry forward. There were fewer phone launches than usual. But I don't think that was surprising, given the fact that most mobile phone makers didn't want to take that risk of coinciding a launch with this event when there was still massive uncertainty about how well attended it would be or whether it would go ahead just a couple of weekends before. And sustainability was a major theme at the show, and that will be a theme that you'll see going through this presentation as well. So that opens it up. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Kester now, who'll walk you through some of the operator trends, and I'll be back to look at smartphones in a bit.
Great. Well, thank you very much indeed, Ben, and hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. So it was a busy show for operators, even if the pandemic restricted somewhat the presence of telecom operators from some of the leading markets, notably China, Japan, and the US. And so this meant really that Deutsche Telekom, Telefonica, Orange, and Vodafone had the strongest presence on the show floor and also in the keynote sessions. And so it's mostly their announcements and exhibits that form the main focus of this section. So Ben's already mentioned it, 5G was a major theme, but the conversation has absolutely moved on now compared to previous years, with a far greater focus on real-world use cases and the capabilities of live networks, some of which form the basis of several demonstrations at the show. So, for example, Orange showed a remote-controlled car race over 5G, a 5G virtual reality experience of Notre Dame, and also an underwater 5G drone submerged in an aquarium in Valencia that was actually remotely controlled using hand movements from the booth in Barcelona. That's the picture on the left-hand side at the bottom there. Then we had Deutsche Telekom, which highlighted a partnership with the broadcaster RTL on 5G video production using network slicing. And the vision here is that one day journalists may be able to broadcast TV-ready videos with just a smartphone. There was lots of demos around smart industry, robotics, factory automation, and drones, powered by 5G, but importantly, also leveraging other technologies such as edge computing, IoT, and artificial intelligence. Telefonica showed off a hologram of an Olympic badminton gold medalist who was offering training tips to Telefonica staff on the MWC stand, and also a robot that could improve safety by working in hazardous environments. Then in private networks, Saudi Arabia's STC showed off a concept of a 5G port that uses drones, autonomous vehicles, and cranes to improve safety and efficiency. That's the middle picture there. And perhaps the most popular exhibit was 5G bartender from Telefonica on the right-hand side there. This is targeted at the hospitality sector. It uses edge compute and facial recognition to help interact with customers, and of course serve a range of drinks. And not surprisingly, it garnered plenty of interest from thirsty delegates at the show. If we move on to the next slide, another topic hot among operators, as we predicted, was OpenRAN. This is the technology that disaggregates the hardware and software elements of the radio access network, effectively enabling greater choice for operators from their network suppliers. And the big announcement here was from Vodafone, which committed to deploy OpenRAN in 30% of its European masts by 2030, initially in rural locations. Telefonica is pretty much as enthusiastic as Vodafone around OpenRAN, and at the show it said that it sees initial rollout of about 200 sites in its leading markets during this year and next. But the industry's biggest OpenRAN champion is Japanese operator Rakuten, and at a packed press conference, it's Rakuten Symphony arm, which is deploying a new business model by selling OpenRAN software and support services to other operators, made several announcements, including a partnership with AT&T, Cisco, and also with Nokia. Then Ben's already touched on this, sustainability, a major theme for operators. Vodafone pretty much went all in on this topic. Its entire stand given over to helping the environment. One major focus point for Vodafone was an initiative announced just before MWC about extending the life of mobile phones through trade-in and recycling. Then we had Deutsche Telekom, which highlighted an alliance with Gencell Energy to power mobile sites in Germany carbon-free. It also promoted a device as a service scheme for companies that it said helps reduce electronic waste. And then we have Orange, which shared efforts to reuse network infrastructure as part of a program called Oscar. Then we had the Monday morning keynotes, at which GSMA Director General Max Granwid focused on efforts to connect the unconnected and called on governments to release spectrum affordably and in a timely manner. And Vodafone CEO Nick Reed saying that he feels that Vodafone has fallen behind markets like South Korea, China, and the US in deploying 5G. And at the same time, he called for local scale to address fragmented European markets. Two other quick points to mention before I move on to the next presenter. In smart home, Deutsche Telekom and Telefonica were the most vocal. Telefonica highlighting partnerships with Rakuten and TikTok, while Deutsche Telekom showcased new features such as monitoring who's currently in the home, or creating or adding to shared shopping and to-do lists. And last point to make is around industrial IoT. The big shout here was from Deutsche Telekom, which announced a service called TIoT. This is focused all around simplicity with a single service level agreement and pricing scheme. And this aims to overcome a lot of the complexities with IoT when spanning different markets. For example, when you're roaming from one network to another internationally. That's a really quick whistle-stop tour of the operators. I'm now going to hand back, Ben, to you to talk about the smartphones.
Great stuff. Thank you, Kester. And on to smartphone themes. One of the big things was the Chinese manufacturers who were at Mobile World Congress in force. There were all the companies like Honor, Oppo, Realme, Xiaomi, and others who clearly were looking to secure some of Huawei's lost share and influence subsequent to the sanctions and restrictions which were placed on their devices business by the US administration. That created some interesting dynamics, and I'll talk about those in a moment. Budget phones were a big story as well. We saw lots of sub $100 phones, some significantly cheaper than that, but primarily using 4G technology. There weren't any budget 5G phones there, but we did see phones in the 5G space that got as low as $150, which is really quite remarkable given the current shortage of chipsets and the competition in that space. Smartphone environmental credentials and innovations were flexed. We saw most companies having a story around sustainability and the environment, although I think there was a general awareness that just taking the charger out of the box is no longer enough. Commitments to the longevity of the device and the repairability of the device are now essential. And foldables became a more legitimate category, and I'll talk about those in a moment. Next slide, please. In terms of the flagship announcements, the key ones that I'd pick out were the Honor Magic 4 family, the phone you can see on the bottom left-hand side, a striking design, which I think some would say was reminiscent of the Nokia Lumia 1020. This ticked all the boxes, top of the range, Qualcomm Snapdragon processor, great camera, and all of the features you would expect, and quite a punchy price. Oppo, with their Find X series products, which you can see in the middle, had announced those devices ahead of the show, and they had an enormous booth at the stand, a huge statement of commitment from Oppo, who clearly are really gunning hard to grab some share in the European market and around the world. Realme also really caught the headlines with their GT2 Pro. We believe this is currently the most affordable product using the Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 chipset. It again ticks all the boxes in terms of a great camera, nice looking design, and Realme signaled for the first time that they are moving into the true flagship category. Beyond that, we had HMD Global, who announced a new C series range of devices on the bottom left-hand side, phones that cost 80 euros, 100 euros, and 120 euros. They are doing very well in some of the markets which need affordable or mid-range phones, sub-Saharan Africa being an important one, where they're working with a soft lock on the phone, which means people can buy the phones through a purchase plan where maybe they spend $30 to get a $100 phone and then pay in installments over time. If they don't pay, the phone gets locked. Chinese manufacturer TCL launched a huge suite of affordable, striking phones that you can see there, the TCL 20 range, and they're certainly becoming a real force to be reckoned with in the mobile phone space. Samsung had already announced their flagship, the Galaxy S22 range. They had an enormous stand, which at first glance, as you can see, looked like it was just an empty stand with some seats. But actually hidden behind that enormous screen was a gallery-like, museum-like setup with multiple rooms with all of their different product areas. And that photograph was taken on the first day before anyone had arrived at the show. I can assure you it was packed for much of the exhibition. And then finally, Xiaomi didn't have a lot of announcements to make in terms of phones. In fact, they announced their Xiaomi Series 12 phone yesterday, another flagship competing in that tightly competed space with Chinese manufacturers. But they announced a Poco phone, actually two devices, which were very affordably priced. Next slide, please. Foldables emerged as a category that I think has become legitimized. I think now with Samsung shipping what we believe is many millions of units of its Galaxy Z Fold device have really helped to build this category. And we saw products from Xiaomi, the Mi Mix product. We saw a product from Oppo, the Find N, bottom right-hand side, very nice device. Honor had two products there, the Magic 5 and the P50 Pocket. And also there were the devices from Samsung. TCL also showed a range of concept devices, one of which you can see here, the Fold and Roll, which was a foldable phone with a rollable screen that slipped out of the side. They also had a 360-degree foldable, which wrapped back round on itself, and a device which had a flexible screen, which actually wrapped around the edge of the product as well. And with that, I'll hand over to my colleague Izzy to talk about wearables.
Thank you very much, Ben. It was a little bit of a quiet show for wearables, but I would say probably the main takeaway from the major connected device companies was that pretty much all players, bar Apple, are now just trying to differentiate from their competitors by offering personalized lifestyle feedback on the device platform rather than on the device hardware itself. And the reason that we think this is because sensor technology innovations aren't offering the same return on investment as they have done in the past. So examples of this at the conference this year was the Huawei new running feature on their GT Runner, and then Samsung as well announced their new sleep coaching feature too. But beyond those mainstream players, the only other real story for me at MWC was around the kids' smartwatches. So the main announcement that we saw was that Explorer, which is that device that you can see in the middle of the screen here, will be announcing 3 new devices in 2022. And these follow a good, better, best pricing model. 2 of those devices are essentially just offering incremental improvements to the existing portfolio. But the standout kind of device is that one that you see in the middle there, which is the X6 Pro. And this device is one of the first in the kids segment that we believe is really trying to develop a feature set fit for purpose to actually engage children. So some of the sticking points in the kids smartwatch space in the past have been that manufacturers have struggled to develop feature sets that children actually want to wear. So this product is still in development, but things that we might see coming onto it are things like voice assistant, downloading music, increased activity and health monitoring as well. So that's quite interesting. It's also quite an interesting product because this company is going to try and charge $400 for this device, which is quite staggering given that that's kind of the level that people are prepared to pay for a top end Apple device. So we're a little bit skeptical about that approach. We know that price is already a bit of a sticking point for consumers, but it'd be interesting to see how that's received by the market. And then the only other thing I wanted to offer was that Trackimo, which is a company that has previously worked with Vodafone to create their Curve GPS tracker, is going to be working with Nickelodeon in 2022 to create a kids smartwatch. Now, this is interesting because Nickelodeon obviously is going to be able to leverage all of those amazing kids brands for their branding and for promotion of the device as well. So watch the space on that one. And those were kind of the main stories related to wearables. So a little bit of a quiet show, but it'll be interesting to see how those kids watch developments go forward. And now I'm passing over to Leo, who I think will be talking about the Metaverse.
I will be talking about the Metaverse. Yeah, thank you very much, Izzy. But first of all, I'd like to kick off with a bit of review of looking at extended reality devices that we show at MWC. And this was something that I was really, really looking forward to. It's fair to say that virtual reality and augmented reality devices are things that often make most sense when you can try them. And as a device category, I think they've really suffered a bit in the last couple of years due to the fact that there haven't been trade shows and events where people can go and get hands-on with new devices that have been announced or that have launched. And that's actually, I think, been a little bit of a difficulty for the category. And MWC gave us a chance to address that because we were able to go and see and try various devices which have launched over the last year or 18 months and have a bit of a play around with them. And there were a couple of different products that I found particularly interesting. I think when we look at augmented reality and the idea of smart glasses, there were a number of really interesting devices and products and prototypes on the show. One particular company which I think attracted a lot of attention in this regard was Oppo, which had two products on its stand. So first of all, it had the Oppo Air Glass, and then separately had the Oppo AR Glass, which are confusingly similar names, but two different products. So the Air Glass is the device you can see in the first two pictures on this slide. What this is kind of a heads-up display that you can clip onto the side of compatible glasses and receive smartphone notification type content pushed to your vision through a waveguide display, which displays just in the one eye. Now, realistically, this actually gives you a very, very limited sort of heads-up display experience. You can get notifications and things like turn-by-turn directions as you're walking, but it's not the same as having sort of a genuine augmented reality overlay on your existence and as you're walking around the world. So a little bit limited for me, but it did attract a lot of attention. I was far more impressed with Oppo's AR glass, so the third picture on the slide there, which was a fully fledged augmented reality headset, which you can plug into a compatible smartphone to actually participate in full augmented reality experiences in 360 degrees and really high quality. As impressive as this was, however, and I did enjoy using it, the issue with this sort of device is it's still pretty bulky, still pretty heavy, and still something that's not very comfortable to wear for a very long time. And ultimately, augmented reality still needs to find a sweet spot between these two sorts of different devices, something that is lightweight and capable and powerful enough to give a really compelling experience, but not so big and heavy that it's not comfortable to wear. And I think this kind of, for me at least, these devices really serve to show the tension that still exists there. TCL was another company that showed off a prototype device, which is the one on the far right-hand side, its smart glasses. And these are still kind of comically oversized, really, again, just showing that it's still a case of trying to miniaturize down devices into a more sleek and lightweight form factor. Unfortunately, those ones weren't actually powered up and ready to try on, but it was still just an indicator of the size, the bulk of the device remains a problem. When we look at virtual reality, just a really quick note, there was very little in the way of dedicated virtual reality device news at MWC. But what was notable was that across the show floor, pretty much any VR headset you saw was an Oculus Quest 2. Now, obviously, this is a device which launched about 18 months ago or so now at a really attractive price point. It's a very easy device to pick up and use straight out of the box without needing to use a PC or a games console to power it. And this is something that I think made it super easy for a trade show, super flexible and super easy to use. I'll just quickly then step onto a slide highlighting the metaverse. Now, this has become a big talking topic across VR and AR and beyond. And we expected this to really be a big theme at MWC. We thought it would be a big topic that might really dominate and take over the show floor, because it threatens to do that. At CES, it seemed to be a big topic and that really took over the conversation. And actually at MWC, this didn't really happen too much. And we were glad to see that. There were some operators in attendance who did steer quite hard into the concept of the metaverse. SK Telecom was one really interesting example. Its booth was all about virtual and augmented reality and engaging with the metaverse. But I think this is understandable because it's one operator that's done a particularly good job in engaging with VR and AR from quite an early standpoint. But I think looking beyond this, it was interesting to see that there were some more sensible conversations around how the metaverse could actually be reached, some discussions around network and infrastructure. There was a particular discussion with a telecom infra project, which Meta had put together around how to build a network to support the metaverse. And that was a really, I think, interesting indicator of how sensible conversations can progress. But on networks, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Richard, who will take it from here.
Thank you very much, Leo. Just a quick reminder before I run into my slides that you can still submit questions to us. Please just click on the questions icon at the bottom of the screen and submit those. And we'll do our best to get through those at the end of today's presentation. Before we get there, I'm just going to run through a few of the highlights related to networks. As my colleague Kester mentioned, sustainability was a big topic at the event. And in the context of mobile network infrastructure, that really played through in two particular strands. One was very much focused on solutions related to energy consumption reduction at the cell site, so lower powered radios essentially. So there was a range of different launches around that, one particular from Ericsson, which upgraded its 5G RAN portfolio with 7 new product offerings.
And the other part was really more the systemic, holistic view of saving energy across the network as a whole. So here we were seeing vendors kind of leveraging AI-driven analytics techniques to make more proactive decisions across the network as a whole about access to network resources. And one of the key kind of benefits of doing that is a reduction in power consumption across the network as a whole. Aside from that, we saw a lot of advocates of adoption of 5G and the need to accelerate that, because only when you get into broader adoption of 5G can you really benefit across a number of different vertical industries from the energy efficiency it can glean compared to that of 4G networks. So a lot of push there in the messaging across operators and solution vendors. One of the other kind of key networking themes was around VirtualRAN, and related to that, cloud native networking in general. A number of announcements that were quite interesting in this space, many of them coming in at the topic from different directions. We saw one from Cisco and Rakuten, a collaboration, a memorandum of understanding that they signed around working together on virtual RAN solutions that really kind of had an OpenRAN element to it. And that was kind of at the root of that collaboration. Fujitsu made an announcement around VirtualRAN software that was more, again, tied to that theme of sustainability, a solution that had the ability to enable operators to cut carbon emissions, it claims, by 50% over the next few years. Another announcement that came from Intel around their processors, the Xeon Scalable range, was around a VirtualRAN and its relationship to edge computing. So again, a different angle again that we saw there around VirtualRAN and cloud native networking. And just to show really as an indicator of how mainstream this kind of evolution in RAN architecture has become, Samsung's VirtualRAN 5G solution won the CTO choice for Best Mobile Technology Breakthrough at the GLOMO Award. So really kind of does throw quite a sharp spotlight on vRAN technologies and the gradual adoption that it's seeing in operator networks. Related to vRAN, not necessarily entirely synonymous with it, was ORAN. We are seeing and saw at the show more evidence of one of the key drivers of ORAN to make the solutions ecosystem more diverse. So we saw a number of different announcements from solution providers around their ORAN portfolio expansions. One around the OpenBeam portfolio from Mavenir that was quite interesting to view, and another one around Rakuten, very much the poster child, as it were, for ORAN, and a collaboration with Qualcomm there as well around ORAN portfolio offerings, both at the RU, the radio unit, and the distributed unit. So more evidence from an objective point of view from, wherever you are in the ORAN debate, there's certainly evidence that traction is coming, not just from the operators, as my colleague Kester mentioned, but also from the solutions ecosystem. Edge was a big theme. I've mentioned it a little bit already, but again, different dimensions to the announcements around the interaction between 5G and Edge. One that caught my eye from AT&T had a private mobile network dimension to it, and this was around integration of Microsoft Azure with its private networks and edge computing capabilities there. And another one from Ericsson, which in partnership with Qualcomm launched its Edge Exposure Server, which was really about kind of creating seamless API functionality for the app dev community to access network capabilities and utilize those in a seamless way to create more service-orientated apps for operators to offer on their networks. Final slide from me, just a few other themes that were interesting in the networks environment. The transition from 5G non-standalone to standalone, a few announcements around kind of benchmark moments, if you like, that certain operators and vendors had achieved together in that phased kind of evolution towards 5G standalone, one from SKT and Samsung that was interesting. As Leo mentioned, Metaverse ready networking. That's going to be a buzzword I think we hear a lot more of in messaging from solution providers over the next year or two. Really, the early conversations are around what does that mean in terms of user experience? What does it mean in terms of network reliability and performance? And there was some conversation also about 5G's role within that metaverse ready network. A lot of attention in early days around optical networking capabilities as opposed to 5G. 5G private networks, that's no surprise, was a big topic again. Quite a few interesting announcements. A little bit more on the commercial side than necessarily the technical solution side. Cisco, and again, we've seen this from HPE as well, talking about consumption-based models, kind of as a service model that they've launched. Some on the technical side, ZTE's iCube, a kind of pre-integrated solution for private mobile networks that also was interesting. Network operations, I mentioned that sort of leveraging of AI for data insights to make networks more proactive in their decision making about access to network resources. So there was quite a lot coming through, certainly from the chip and component vendors around that kind of story. And then some signs in the conversations we were having with hyperscalers and telcos of a kind of coming together, more of a sort of meeting of mindsets. There's been a little bit of a standoff for various kind of commercial reasons between those kind of groups of players, but signs that they're beginning to understand how each other works and respect each other's territory a little bit more. And there's some really good, healthy indicators of partnerships that are really now bearing fruit for both parties. So just interesting to report on that. Okay, that's it from me. Thanks very much. I think I'll hand back to Ben and we'll take any questions.
I think it's coming to me now, actually. I'm happy to coordinate some of the questions. Thanks, team. Thank you, Richard. So, yeah, I've been following the questions. We've got a few. There's still time to submit a few more questions if anybody wants to put any into the question box. A couple of questions that have come through around accessing the slides, and they will be made available immediately after this call. Another question that has come through is around, it says, what is innovative about Deutsche Telekom's T-IoT offer and what technologies does it support? Kester, could I hand that one to you?
Yeah, you can, Simon. Thank you very much. So thanks for the question. It's a good one. So T-IoT was kind of one of the biggest shouts from Deutsche Telekom at the show. So in terms of the technology that it supports, so it supports the narrowband IoT technology, so that's NB-IoT and LTE-M, and also LTE, 4G and 5G. In terms of what's innovative and what's different, it's all around simplicity. So the idea is that an enterprise customer can, for example, sign a service level agreement and pricing scheme just on its own, just a single one. And so therefore that avoids the complexity of multiple SLAs, say, for example, each in different countries with different pricing schemes and different contracts and so on. So it's a much more simple, holistic offer for the customer. And I understand that this is based on, I think it's 150 roaming agreements that Deutsche Telekom and also T-Mobile US, which is its other partner, has established. So it's all around simplicity and convenience, which has kind of overcome one of the biggest challenges of IoT internationally, which is complexity.
Great, thank you, Kester. One other question is, when will we see AR glasses which do strike the balance between a light form factor and good capability? I think it makes sense to pass that to Leo.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Good question. I think we will start to see more in that direction over the next couple of years, but I think we're still maybe, I don't know, we're still probably, I would guess, maybe 4 or 5 years away from the kind of true promise of smart glasses, which look and feel much like the normal glasses today and have some sort of genuinely smart capability built into them, especially if we're looking at augmented reality. There are so many challenges in terms of shrinking down and miniaturizing the components to actually provide augmented reality within something that's wearable, comfortable, light, has good enough battery life to support that. I think one of the big things that might help to unlock some of this, some of these challenges, will be the idea of wirelessly tethering from a head-worn device to a smartphone. Right now, typically what we see is people doing that with a physical cable, which it works, but it's still a bit clunky. And I think what will be a really interesting breakthrough is if we start to get to devices which actually have wireless connectivity, so that your phone can still be doing the processing work, can still be kind of the actual computing power of a pair of smart glasses, and actually realistically it lessens the burden on the device that you're wearing on your head to quite a large extent. I think we could start to see devices of that nature coming in towards maybe even the end of this year, or if not then maybe in 2023. But I think something which is kind of the true kind of nirvana of proper augmented reality smart glasses, we're probably still a good number of years away yet.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Leo. A few more questions. Did you see any unusual smartphones that caught your eye? Ben, you best to take that one.
Absolutely, and MWC is always the gift that keeps giving in terms of unusual products. This year wasn't a vintage year. Usually I managed to sniff out something that is quite unusual. The phone that I saw that was most striking was a sub-brand of ZTE. It's a gaming brand called Red Magic, and the Red Magic 7 was a gaming phone with an integrated mechanical fan, which runs at 20,000 RPM. It has a RGB color indicator in it as well. So for people who are really, really putting their phone through its paces with very intensive gaming, it keeps the processor cool and optimizes the performance. And they even had a snap-on attachment, a great big fan that you could put onto the back of the device, which would cool it even further. So that was the one that caught my eye and was probably the most unusual and most notable kind of non-primary product that I saw in the smartphone space.
Thank you very much, Ben. Okay, a couple more questions. We're probably running out of time then. Was there any promotion of 5G Advanced? Richard, are you the best to take this one?
Yes, I'm happy to take that, and happy to give you a fairly short answer, really, which is basically no. Not that I was aware of, not that I saw in any of the major vendors, solution providers launches. A little bit more in conversations at booths and in meetings with some operators and vendors, but more about the promise of it further down the road. So not really in terms of commercial manifestations in any way, but a little bit more in terms of the next 12 months or so.
Okay, we've also got a question on throw any light on the announcement on 5G private networks and what we stand to gain from it. And Joe, would you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, so it's interesting that we've got a private network group within GSA. And one of the things that we've been trying to do is to get an agreement on what are the categories of private networks and how to track them. So you'll see more information from GSA on that, as well as more reports and more activity in our databases. But it's an interesting area and a lot of growth. All our members are really, well, our suppliers like Nokia, Ericsson, Huawei, ZTE, etc., are all working on private network activity. And so I think it's probably an early embryonic part of the market that was going to grow over time.
Perhaps I can add a little bit of comment in terms of how myself as a CCS Insight analyst have been looking at this. And that's really in two strands. One is very much the technology platform, the coming together of 5G RAN and the operators, but also the hyperscalers and what they bring in terms of edge compute and AI and other kind of platform related capabilities. And then that leads to the second kind of strand of my research, which is around the commercial landscape, the value chain, which is still somewhat fragmented, and it's quite a complex environment for enterprises to step into. So there's really kind of the figuring out of the technology platform, but alongside that, the kind of commercial landscape and relationships. So we've not only been looking at how those solutions have been positioned, but who really is the lead kind of provider who's pulling that all together, whether that's a systems integrator, whether it's a hyperscaler and cloud provider, whether it's a telco and so on, or whether it could be a network solutions provider going direct to the channel, to the enterprise themselves. So still a very complicated environment, but we were seeing evidence, and I tried to highlight that in my presentation, of a few areas where some of those solutions are becoming a little bit more pre-integrated, trying to reduce some of that complexity for enterprises.
Thank you very much, Richard, and thank you, team, for fielding those questions. There's a few other questions I can see in the chat box. They do overlap a little bit. We will certainly respond to everyone after this call, but I just want to thank the speakers, and I'm going to hand back to Richard now.
Many thanks, and thank you all for joining us today. I'd like to close today's webinar by once again thanking you all for joining us today. After the event, you will receive a link to the webinar recording and to the presentation, and also to the CCS Insight report, which is all available for download from gsacom.com. The next event, as you see, is on the 10th of May, and that's the GSA 4G 5G Fixed Wireless Access Forum Plenary, which will bring together operators, regulators and vendors to share best practice on driving global adoption of fixed wireless access services, with a particular focus on developments in the Middle East, Africa and Europe regions. For the latest updates on all GSA research and activities, please do follow GSA on all our social channels. You'll find Global Mobile Supplier Association on Twitter, on LinkedIn, WeChat and on Weibo. And if you visit gsacom.com, you can also subscribe to our weekly Research Digest emails and new report notifications. So finally, on behalf of Joe, research partners at CCS Insight and the wider GSA team, all that reminds me to say thank you again for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon at the next GSA event. Many thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.